lonely Apache warrior hadn't touched a woman in 15 years, until a mail-order bride arrived by mistake. The sun painted the land in shades of gold and red every morning, and the nights were so clear that the stars looked close enough to touch. Micah had lived on this land his entire life, and it had become his world. He was a man shaped by history, by family, and by a deep connection to the traditions of his Apache ancestors. Yet, despite the beauty surrounding him, there was a loneliness that clung to him like a shadow. For 15 years, Micah had lived without a woman by his side. He hadn't touched another human in a way that brought warmth or closeness, and the thought of intimacy felt distant, almost impossible. Not because he didn't want it, but because life had taught him caution, patience, and sometimes sorrow. The world had a way of taking people away, of leaving holes that were hard to fill. Micah had seen friends and relatives come and go, and he had learned to protect his heart, keeping it tucked away under layers of solitude. His cabin sat at the edge of a wide, open plain. It was small, made of weathered wood that had turned silver with time. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney in the mornings, carrying the scent of burning sage, which he used to honor his ancestors and cleanse the air. Inside, the cabin was simple. A single bed, a wooden table, and shelves lined with books, jars, and small artifacts from his family's history. Everything had its place, and every object carried a story. Micah's life was orderly, quiet, and disciplined. He rose with the sun, tended the small garden near the cabin, and hunted or fished when needed. His days were full of activity, yet his nights were long and silent, echoing with memories. The neighbors knew Micah as a strong, silent man. He didn't speak much unless necessary, and when he did, his words were measured, calm, and thoughtful. Children of the reservation often looked at him with awe and curiosity. Some said he looked like the warriors of old, tall and broad-shouldered, with eyes that seemed to see everything and everyone. Yet, they never knew the quiet sadness in those eyes, the solitude he carried like a cloak around his shoulders. Micah's solitude was not just physical, it was emotional too. After losing his parents at a young age, he had been forced to grow quickly, learning the ways of survival in a world that didn't wait for anyone. Life had demanded strength, resilience, and independence. He had learned to rely on himself for almost everything. Over time, he realized that letting someone close could mean risking pain again. And so, he chose to remain alone, to find comfort in routines in the land, and in the quiet voice of the wind through the canyons. Despite his self-imposed isolation, Micah was not bitter. He appreciated the simple joys of life that others often overlooked. He loved the feel of the soil between his fingers when planting seeds, the sound of the river flowing near the mountains, and the way the desert flowers bloomed after the rare rains. These small moments brought him peace, a sense of purpose, and a quiet happiness that needed no companion. Still, at times, the nights felt unbearably long. When the stars stretched across the sky like silver threads, he would sometimes whisper to himself, wondering what life would have been like if he had not walked the path of solitude. Micah's days were filled with practical work, but he also devoted time to honoring his heritage. He would tell the stories of his ancestors to anyone who would listen, especially to the children who came to the cabin asking questions about the past. He spoke of brave warriors, wise elders, and the struggles and victories that shaped his people. His voice carried a quiet authority, and even in his solitude, he felt a deep connection to those who had come before him. These stories reminded him that he was part of something larger than himself, a thread in the fabric of history, and that brought a sense of pride and belonging that no companionship could replace. Still, there were moments when solitude felt heavy. After a long day of work, Micah would sit by the fire, sipping tea made from desert herbs, and let his mind wander. Sometimes he thought of laughter he had once shared with friends or family, of voices that were now silent. He remembered the warmth of human touch, the comfort of a shared meal, and the quiet moments of understanding between two people who cared for each other. These memories were bittersweet, reminding him of both the beauty and the pain of connection. Micah had a few visitors from time to time, neighbors bringing news, supplies, or gifts, but those visits were brief. He appreciated the company, but he never invited anyone to stay. His home was a sanctuary, a place where he could be fully himself without compromise. He had grown accustomed to the rhythm of his life, and the thought of changing it, of opening his heart to someone new, was both tempting and terrifying. 15 years of solitude had built walls that were strong and high, and breaking through them seemed almost impossible. Yet, life had a way of surprising people when they least expected it. Micah didn't know it yet, but an event was about to occur that would challenge everything he had believed about himself, about trust, and about the possibility of love. The quiet, ordered life he had built would soon be interrupted by something entirely unexpected. A mistake that would bring a stranger into his world, a stranger who would test his patience, his courage, and his heart. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Micah sat on the porch of his cabin, listening to the soft whispers of the desert wind. The air was warm and dry, carrying the faint scent of sage and wildflowers. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel gratitude for the land, for his ancestors, and for the life he had created. But deep down, he knew that something was missing, a piece of life that could not be found in the land or in solitude. And though he didn't realize it, the emptiness he carried would soon meet its opposite, changing the rhythm of his days and the beat of his heart in ways he could never have imagined. Micah's story was one of quiet strength, resilience, and the complex beauty of a life lived in solitude. He had survived, thrived, and honored his heritage, yet he had done so alone. The years had shaped him, molded him, and protected him from heartbreak, but they had also left him yearning for something more. Something unexpected, something human, something that would remind him that even the strongest warriors sometimes need a companion to share the journey of life. And in the heart of the desert, under the endless sky, that moment was closer than he could ever know. One bright morning, Micah was sitting outside his cabin, listening to the soft sounds of the desert. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, and birds flitted across the sky. He was enjoying the calm, as he always did, when a small truck pulled up to the cabin. It was unusual. Deliveries didn't often come this far into the remote area. Micah watched silently as the driver jumped out, carrying a small crate with care. The crate was marked with his name, but Micah didn't remember ordering anything. Curious, he walked over to inspect it. Just as he was about to lift the lid, the crate shook slightly, and a voice called out from inside. "Hello? Is anyone there?" Micah froze. He had never expected this. Slowly, he opened the crate, and to his surprise, he found a woman sitting inside. She looked around, blinking in confusion and relief at the same time. She was young, with dark hair, warm brown eyes, and a look of determination mixed with curiosity. I think I'm in the wrong place," she said softly. Micah's first reaction was disbelief. A woman in a crate. Surely this had to be some kind of mistake. He stepped back, scratching his head, trying to make sense of the situation. The woman stood, brushing herself off, and held out her hand politely. "I'm Alina," she said. "I think someone sent me here by mistake." Micah looked at her carefully. He could see that she was sincere. There was no trick, no deceit in her eyes. He had expected someone loud, demanding, or perhaps afraid, but Alina seemed calm, practical, and surprisingly composed considering the unusual way she had arrived. After a moment of silence, Micah finally nodded. "Micah, you're in the wrong place then," he said slowly. Alina laughed softly, a warm, musical sound that seemed to carry across the quiet desert. "It seems that way," she admitted. "But maybe this mistake could work out." "I'm not sure yet." Micah raised an eyebrow. He had been alone for 15 years, and the idea of having a stranger in his home, even by mistake, made him uneasy. Yet there was something about her that made him pause. Something about her calm presence and respectful tone made him wonder if perhaps this was not just a simple error. For the first few hours, there was an awkward silence. Elena tried to make herself comfortable, though she was careful not to overstep. She asked questions about the cabin, about the land, and about Micah's daily life. He answered cautiously, speaking only as much as necessary. But there was an unusual ease in the conversation, a rhythm that was surprising for both of them. Elena explained that she had been part of a mail-order bride service. Somehow, in the process of sending her to someone else, her papers and shipping instructions had been mixed up, and she had ended up at Micah's remote cabin instead. It was an honest mistake, but it had created a situation that neither of them could ignore. Micah listened carefully, not quite knowing how to respond. On one hand, he felt irritation. His quiet, orderly life had just been interrupted. On the other hand, he felt curiosity, an emotion he hadn't experienced in years. The first evening was quiet and tense. Micah prepared a simple meal of beans, rice, and roasted vegetables, while Elena helped by washing the small amount of dishes from his previous meals. She moved carefully, respecting the space, and though he did not show it, Micah was impressed by her willingness to adapt to his routine so quickly. She didn't complain about the simplicity of the cabin or the lack of modern comforts. Instead, she observed quietly, asking thoughtful questions and listening to his stories about the land and his ancestors. As the night settled, they sat outside by the fire. The sky was dark and filled with stars, and the desert air was cool. Elena spoke of her life, of the small town she had left behind, and the dreams she had once had of adventure and independence. Micah listened, intrigued despite himself. He had not spoken to anyone about his feelings in years, but somehow her words encouraged him to share. He spoke about the quiet he had lived with for 15 years, about the routines that filled his days, and about the solitude that had become both a comfort and a weight. Despite the unusual circumstances, an unexpected bond began to form. Elena's presence was different from anyone Micah had known. She was respectful, gentle, and curious, yet not timid. She had a way of observing the land, the animals, and the stars that reminded him of the lessons his ancestors had passed down. She asked questions about his traditions and listened carefully when he spoke about rituals, the history of the Apache people, and the ways he had maintained the land. Micah was surprised at how easily he could talk to her, how naturally the conversation flowed. Over the next few days, Elena settled into the cabin. She helped with chores, organized the small kitchen, and even learned some of Micah's daily routines. He found himself teaching her how to identify edible plants, how to track the deer, and how to respect the land in ways he had learned from his father. For the first time in years, he felt the satisfaction of sharing knowledge, of passing on the wisdom that had been so important to him. And for the first time, he felt companionship, not loud or demanding, but quiet, gentle, and real. Micah still had moments of hesitation. He had spent so many years alone that the idea of another person in his life felt foreign. He worried about how this mistake might end, whether Elena would leave, or whether he would need to send her away to restore his old routine. Yet with every shared meal, every conversation by the fire, and every laugh they shared, his walls began to weaken. He began to realize that this unexpected mistake might be something more than just an accident. It might be an opportunity for connection, for trust, and for a new chapter in his life. Elena, for her part, was patient. She understood that Micah had been alone for a long time, and she did not push him to change or to reveal his feelings. She simply observed, listened, and participated in the life of the cabin. Her presence was steady, comforting, and honest. Slowly she became part of the rhythm of the cabin, not as an intruder but as someone who belonged there, almost as if she had always been meant to be a part of it. One afternoon, a minor accident happened. While Micah was chopping wood, he slipped slightly and cut his hand. Alina rushed to help him, carefully cleaning and bandaging the wound. The moment was quiet, intimate, and gentle. Micah noticed the warmth of her hands, the kindness in her eyes, and for the first time in years, he felt a connection that was more than just words or presence. It was subtle, natural, and powerful in a way he hadn't expected. By the end of the week, Micah realized that his life had changed in ways he hadn't anticipated. A simple mistake had brought a stranger into his world, someone who respected his space, shared his routines, and quietly filled the silence that had been a constant in his life for 15 years. He did not yet know what the future held, but he knew that Alina's arrival had opened a door he had long closed. It was a door to trust, companionship, and perhaps something deeper, a chance to rediscover the warmth of human connection. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the desert, Micah sat on the porch, watching Alina move inside the cabin. He felt a strange mix of surprise, curiosity, and hope. Life had a way of delivering unexpected lessons, he thought. Sometimes, even a mistake could lead to something meaningful. And as the stars began to twinkle in the sky, he allowed himself quietly to wonder what might come next. The first encounter, the mistaken delivery, and the strange beginning of their relationship had already begun to change him. 15 years of solitude had not prepared him for this, yet he found himself open, cautiously, carefully, and with a growing sense of curiosity. Alina had arrived by mistake, but the effects of her presence were real. In the silence of the desert and the warmth of the cabin, Micah Red Elk began to feel something he had not felt in a long time. The possibility that his life, his heart, and his world could change for the better, in ways he had never imagined. Days passed quietly in the desert. And slowly, a routine began to form between Micah and Alina. The cabin, which had once echoed only with Micah's solitary footsteps and the whisper of the wind, was now filled with shared activity. Alina moved gracefully around the small space, helping with chores, cooking meals, and asking questions about the land and the traditions Micah had always valued. Though her arrival had been a mistake, she was becoming a presence that could no longer be ignored. Micah noticed the small ways Alina brought life into his cabin. She tidied the shelves, polished the wooden table, and even rearranged the small collection of family artifacts so that each piece could be seen and appreciated. At first, he had been wary of her touching things, but he realized that she did so with respect, careful not to disturb anything. Her actions were gentle, almost thoughtful, and he felt a quiet admiration for her attention to detail. For the first time in many years, he allowed someone to share his space without feeling that his solitude was being threatened. They spent long mornings together in the garden. Micah showed Alina how to care for the desert plants, teaching her which herbs could be used for cooking or medicine, and which flowers were sacred in Apache traditions. Alina listened closely, her eyes bright with curiosity, asking questions and trying to remember each lesson. She even began helping him water the small patches of vegetables he had planted. The garden, once a private sanctuary, became a place of connection, a space where learning and companionship could grow side by side. Hunting trips became part of their routine as well. Micah taught Alina how to track animals through the rugged terrain, showing her how to read footprints, understand the direction of the wind, and move quietly through the brush. At first, she struggled to keep up, tripping over rocks or startling birds, but she laughed at herself and tried again. Her laughter was light and natural, carrying across the desert like a song. Micah found himself smiling more than he had in years, and though he did not say it aloud, he felt a warmth growing in his chest, a feeling he had long thought impossible to experience again. Evenings were the quietest and most special part of their days. They would sit by the fire, watching the flames dance and listening to the soft night sounds of the desert. Micah would share stories of his ancestors, telling Alina about brave warriors, wise elders, and the struggles and victories that had shaped their people. Alina listened attentively, asking questions when she did not understand, showing a genuine interest that impressed Micah. Her curiosity and respect reminded him of why he had always cherished his heritage and why it was important to pass it on. Alina, in turn, shared her own stories. She spoke about her childhood in New Mexico, about the family she had left behind, and about the dreams she had once held. She did not speak to boast or to seek sympathy. She spoke honestly, with a simplicity that made Micah feel at ease. Listening to her, he realized that people could carry both strength and vulnerability at the same time. Her presence was teaching him patience, understanding, and the quiet joy of listening to another person's life unfold. There were moments of awkwardness, of course. Micah had not been around a woman in 15 years, and the smallest gestures, her laughter, her touch on his arm when helping him with a task, felt both strange and comforting. He found himself observing her carefully, noticing how she moved, how her eyes lit up when she discovered something new, how her hands worked skillfully yet gently. These small details began to matter to him, and he caught himself thinking about them long after the moments had passed. One afternoon, while Alina was preparing dinner, she asked about a small bundle of dried herbs hanging by the window. "What are these for?" she asked, touching them lightly. Micah hesitated for a moment, then explained, "These are sage and cedar. We use them to cleanse the home, to honor the spirits of our ancestors, and to bring peace." Alina nodded thoughtfully. "Can you show me how?" At first, Micah was surprised. He had not shared this ritual with anyone in years, but seeing the sincerity in her eyes, he agreed. Together, they burned the herbs, moving around the cabin slowly, quietly, performing the simple, sacred ceremony. For Micah, it was more than just teaching. It was sharing a piece of himself, a part of his soul. And Alina received it with care, understanding, and respect. After that day, their bond felt deeper. It was a connection built not only on presence, but on shared understanding and trust. As the days turned into weeks, the two grew more comfortable with each other. They began to anticipate each other's needs. Alina would start preparing firewood before the nights became cold, and Micah would gather fresh water or hunt extra game so they could cook together. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's quirks, and each other's silences. Micah, who had once cherished silence above all, began to find comfort in shared quiet, moments where words were unnecessary, yet understanding flowed effortlessly between them. Micah also began to open up emotionally in ways he had not for many years. He talked about his past, about losses he had endured, mistakes he had made, and lessons he had learned. Alina listened without judgment, her presence steady and reassuring. He realized that sharing these stories did not make him weaker. Instead, it made him feel lighter, as if the weight he had carried for so long was being eased by someone who truly cared. One evening, after a particularly long day of working in the garden and cleaning the cabin, they sat outside and watched the sun sink behind the mountains. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and orange, and the desert air was warm and calm. Alina leaned back slightly, resting her head against the wooden post of the porch. "I never thought I'd find a place like this," she said quietly. Micah didn't answer immediately. He looked out at the vast landscape, feeling the quiet strength of the land around him. "It is a special place," he finally said, "but it's also a quiet one. You might find it lonely at times." Alina smiled gently. "Maybe, but sometimes quiet is what you need to hear yourself." Micah considered her words. There was wisdom in what she said, and he realized that she had become a part of his life in ways he had not expected. The cabin, the land, and the routines were the same, but something invisible had changed. The quiet had become alive with shared moments, laughter, and a growing sense of companionship. Their connection was not fast or dramatic. It was gradual, built through small acts, shared work, and honest conversation. Micah began to notice the small comforts of having someone around. A cup of tea prepared just the way he liked it, a soft word spoken at the right moment, a laugh that echoed through the cabin and made the shadows seem less lonely. Alina had arrived by mistake, yet her presence felt purposeful, as if the universe had brought them together for reasons neither of them fully understood. Micah also began to realize that he had missed having a partner to share life with. For years he had believed that solitude was enough, that he could live without companionship. But watching Alina work, laugh, and listen, he saw the beauty of sharing his world with another person. It was not about romance yet. It was about connection, trust, and understanding. He felt a sense of warmth in his heart that had long been absent. One morning, while teaching Alina how to gather firewood safely, she paused and looked at him. "Micah, do you ever feel lonely?" she asked softly. Micah paused, considering his answer. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But not in the way you might think. I've been alone for a long time. It feels safe. But I've also learned that life is richer when shared." Alina nodded, smiling. "I think I understand." And in that moment they both realized that their bond was growing stronger. It was a quiet, steady connection, formed not by grand gestures or dramatic events, but by everyday acts of trust, learning, and shared experience. For Micah, it was a revelation, a reminder that even after years of solitude, life could offer companionship, understanding, and warmth. As the sun rose and set over the desert, painting the land in ever-changing colors, Micah and Alina continued their days together. Their bond deepened with each shared meal, each lesson, and each quiet conversation by the fire. The cabin, once a place of solitude, had become a home filled with connection, respect, and the gentle beginnings of friendship that might one day grow into something even more meaningful. In the heart of the desert, under the vast sky, Micah Red Elk began to feel the first stirrings of hope. He had thought that 15 years of solitude had made him immune to the needs of the heart. Yet in the presence of Alina, he discovered that companionship could arrive unexpectedly, quietly, and gently, even through a mistake, and that the journey toward connection could be just as rewarding as the destination. Time passed slowly in the desert, each day blending into the next with the rhythm of sun and wind. Micah and Alina had settled into a routine that was comfortable, respectful, and unexpectedly joyful. The cabin, once a quiet refuge for Micah alone, was now alive with laughter, shared work, and the small sounds of companionship. Their days were full, but the evenings were when their bond grew the deepest. One evening, a sudden desert storm rolled in. The wind howled across the plains, carrying sand and dust, and the distant mountains were hidden behind dark clouds. Micah had been preparing firewood when the first drops of rain began to fall. He quickly ushered Alina inside the cabin, and together they worked to secure the small space against the elements. The storm was intense, but inside, the cabin was warm and dry, lit by a small fire that crackled and danced. As the storm raged outside, Micah and Alina found themselves sitting close together by the fire. The light flickered across their faces, and the sound of rain pounding on the roof created a rhythm that seemed almost hypnotic. Alina noticed Micah's hand trembling slightly as he handled the firewood. She reached out and placed her hand over his. The touch was gentle, a silent gesture of care. Micah looked at her, surprised by the warmth spreading through him. He had not felt such closeness in 15 years, and the sensation was both strange and comforting. They spoke very little, letting the storm and the fire create the atmosphere. Yet in that silence, something shifted. Micah realized that he had begun to rely on her presence, not just for help with daily chores, but for emotional support. Her calmness in the face of the storm, her steady hand, and her quiet understanding had become anchors in his life. And for Alina, being near Micah helping him, and sharing the warmth of the fire brought a sense of purpose and connection she had not expected. As the storm subsided, they remained close, sharing a blanket that Alina had brought from her small bag. The room was filled with the scent of wet wood and sage smoke, the air warm and safe. Micah found himself speaking softly, telling Alina stories about his childhood, about his parents, and about lessons he had learned while living alone in the desert. He spoke honestly, with no pretense, and Alina listened carefully, her hand still resting over his. At one point, Alina looked up and said, "Micah, I've never met anyone like you. You carry so much history and strength, but you're also gentle in ways that are rare." Micah felt a lump in his throat. He had spent so many years hiding his feelings, protecting himself from emotional pain, that hearing these words from someone he trusted felt both frightening and wonderful. I've lived alone for a long time," he admitted. "I didn't think I needed anyone. But now I realize it feels different, better." The moment was quiet but powerful. Their eyes met, and for the first time there was a true understanding between them. No words were needed beyond what had been spoken. It was a moment of trust, of recognition, and of shared humanity. Micah realized that he was ready to allow himself to feel something he had long denied: closeness, warmth, and even affection. Over the next few days, this closeness deepened. Micah and Alina spent more time together, not only working or sharing meals but also simply sitting together, enjoying the silence and listening to the wind in the desert. Each small touch, passing a cup of tea, brushing dust from each other's clothing, helping with firewood, became significant. Micah noticed how natural it felt to rely on Alina's presence, and he began to enjoy the small comfort of her hand on his arm, her laughter echoing through the cabin, and the quiet confidence she brought to the space. One afternoon, while Micah was repairing the roof, Alina handed him tools and offered suggestions. "Careful with that beam," she said softly. "You don't want to slip." Micah smiled, appreciating her concern. "I'll be fine," he said, but he realized that her care made him feel safer than he had in years. It was not about fear. It was about knowing that someone was looking out for him, someone who cared deeply about his well-being. Later, as they rested inside, Alina brought him a cup of herbal tea. Their fingers brushed as she handed it to him, and Micah felt a spark of warmth that went beyond the fire. It was subtle, yet undeniable, a connection that had been building quietly over weeks. For the first time, he allowed himself to notice it, to acknowledge that he felt something he had not felt in a long time: the desire for closeness, for trust, and for emotional intimacy. That night, after the desert sky had cleared and stars glittered overhead, they sat outside once again, wrapped in blankets. Alina leaned slightly against Micah, and he did not move away. He felt the softness of her presence, the warmth of her body, and the quiet comfort of having someone beside him. His heart, which had been guarded for so long, began to open. He realized that trust and care could be as powerful as solitude, that shared presence could heal old wounds, and that human connection was not something to fear but to embrace. Over the next few weeks, their bond grew stronger. Micah began to show Alina parts of his life he had never shared with anyone: hidden spots in the desert where he meditated, his small journals filled with observations of the land, and the family artifacts he had preserved so carefully. Each act of sharing was a step toward deeper trust, and each moment of closeness brought warmth to the heart he had kept protected for 15 years. One evening, while preparing dinner together, Alina accidentally cut her finger slightly while chopping vegetables. Micah immediately took her hand in his, gently cleaning and bandaging the wound. His touch was careful, tender, and unhurried. Alina looked at him with a soft smile, and for a long moment they simply held hands, feeling the quiet pulse of life and connection. It was not a dramatic moment, but it was deeply significant, a reminder that even small gestures of care could carry great meaning. In the following days, Micah found himself seeking more of these small moments, offering help, sharing stories, and simply sitting quietly with Alina. He realized that intimacy was not always about grand gestures. Sometimes it was in the shared smiles, the quiet understanding, and the trust that grew naturally between two people. For him, these small acts were more powerful than anything he had experienced before, and he began to feel a sense of emotional awakening he had thought impossible after so many years alone. Alina, too, noticed the change in Micah. He was less guarded, more willing to share his thoughts and feelings, and more attentive to her needs. Their conversations became deeper, filled with reflections on life, the desert, and the meaning of companionship. They laughed together, shared silent moments of reflection, and began to anticipate each other's actions and moods. The cabin, once a place of solitude, was now alive with connection, warmth, and mutual understanding. One night, as they sat under the stars, Alina spoke softly. "Micah, I feel like we understand each other in a way that doesn't need words. It's strange but comforting." Micah nodded, his gaze fixed on the night sky. "I've spent 15 years alone," he admitted. "I didn't think I could feel this way again, but with you, it feels right." Safe, real. For the first time in years, Micah allowed himself to feel vulnerable. He leaned slightly toward Alina, and she leaned in as well. Their hands found each other, fingers entwining naturally. It was not rushed or forced. It was a gentle acknowledgement of the connection that had been growing over weeks. The trust, care, and shared experiences had brought them to this moment, and both felt a quiet joy in simply being near each other. As the night deepened, they continued to sit close, talking softly and sharing stories. The desert around them was quiet, the stars shining brightly above, and the world felt safe and infinite. Micah realized that emotional closeness could be as powerful and meaningful as any physical act. It was about presence, trust, and understanding, about allowing someone into the quiet corners of the heart. In the following days, Micah and Alina's relationship continued to grow. They shared meals, worked together, explored the land, and spent quiet evenings by the fire. Each small touch, each shared smile, each gesture of care strengthened the bond between them. Micah had not anticipated that a mistake, a misdelivered crate, could lead to such a profound connection. Yet, he was grateful, slowly learning that even after years of solitude, the heart could open, trust could be rebuilt, and life could surprise in ways beyond imagination. By the end of the month, Micah felt a sense of peace he had not known for years. The quiet loneliness that had once been his constant companion was replaced by a gentle, steady warmth. Alina's presence had brought life, laughter, and trust back into his world. And though their journey was far from over, the first steps toward emotional closeness, understanding, and intimacy had been taken, quietly, naturally, and beautifully. The days in the desert passed quietly, yet they were full of life. Micah and Alina had settled into a rhythm that was both natural and comforting. The cabin, once a place of solitude, had become a home filled with laughter, shared chores, and quiet conversations. The land, with its endless skies and rugged beauty, seemed even more alive with two people sharing its space. Over time, their bond grew stronger. Micah realized that Alina had become an essential part of his life. He looked forward to seeing her smile in the morning, hearing her laugh at small things, and sharing the silence that now felt warm instead of empty. Alina, in turn, had grown to admire Micah's strength, his wisdom, and his quiet way of caring for the land. She had come by mistake, but the mistake had led to a companionship neither of them had expected. One morning, after a cold night, they worked together to repair a section of the cabin's roof that had been damaged by a small storm. Alina handed Micah the nails and the hammer, laughing softly as he grumbled playfully about the difficulty of the work. "I never thought I'd be this busy in the desert," she said, brushing sweat from her forehead. Micah smiled, feeling a lightness he had not known in years. "I never thought I'd have someone to help me with it," he replied. The words were simple, but they carried meaning. They had grown used to each other's presence, and this small acknowledgement of partnership felt profound. They were no longer alone, no longer living separate lives. They were sharing a world, building it together day by day. Their evenings were the moments Micah cherished most. After a long day of work, they would sit by the fire, sharing stories, teaching each other skills, and sometimes just enjoying the quiet. The firelight reflected in their eyes, the shadows moving softly on the walls, and the stars outside made the desert feel endless and magical. These nights became a ritual, a way to connect and to feel the steady, quiet bond that had grown between them. One particular evening, after preparing a simple meal together, Alina suggested they take a walk to a nearby ridge to watch the sunset. The sky blazed with orange, pink, and gold as the sun dipped behind the mountains. They walked side by side, their shoulders occasionally brushing, and neither spoke much. Words were not necessary. The peace and the beauty of the desert were enough, and the closeness they felt made the world feel safe and full. Micah began to notice how small gestures had taken on new meaning. When Alina brought him water after a long day, when she helped him gather firewood, or when she shared her quiet thoughts by the fire, he felt warmth that went beyond comfort. It was a sense of belonging, of being understood, and of knowing that someone cared deeply. He had spent 15 years protecting his heart, yet now he found that sharing it brought strength, not weakness. Their connection also extended to the traditions and heritage Micah valued. Alina learned to cook traditional meals, helped with small ceremonies to honor Micah's ancestors, and listened attentively to the stories he shared. She asked questions, participated, and showed respect for the customs he held dear. This deepened his appreciation for her, not just as a companion, but as someone who genuinely cared about understanding him and his world. One afternoon, after a day spent working in the garden, Alina asked if she could help Micah with a small project he had been delaying, a structure to protect the herbs he grew from the sun and rain. Micah agreed, and together they built it carefully, laughing at their mistakes and celebrating the successes. The sense of accomplishment was shared, and the experience reminded Micah of the power of teamwork and partnership. He realized that life, when shared, could be more rewarding than life alone. As time went on, Micah noticed subtle changes in his own heart. He was more open, patient, and willing to express his feelings. He found himself thinking of Alina during the day, missing her presence when she stepped outside, and feeling gratitude for her companionship. These feelings were new and strange, yet he welcomed them. They were proof that the heart could heal, that trust could grow, and that even after long years of solitude, love and friendship could find a place. Alina, too, felt the deepening bond. She admired Micah's resilience, his knowledge of the land, and the quiet strength that had been shaped by years of solitude. She had come to the desert expecting adventure or perhaps a temporary situation, but she found herself rooted in the life she now shared with him. The cabin, the land, and Micah himself had become central to her life, and she embraced it fully. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Alina spoke softly. "Micah, I feel like this place, this life, has always been meant for us to find each other. Even if it started by mistake, I think we were supposed to meet." Micah looked at her, feeling the truth of her words in his chest. "I didn't believe I needed anyone," he said, "but now I know that life is richer when shared. You've made this place more than a home. You've made it a life." The words were simple yet profound. In that moment they understood the depth of their connection. It was not about grand gestures or sudden passion. It was about trust, care, shared experiences, and the steady growth of companionship. The cabin, the desert, and their daily routines had become the backdrop for something extraordinary, a relationship built on respect, understanding, and quiet love. As the weeks turned into months, their partnership strengthened further. They faced challenges together, from storms that tested the cabin's strength to small accidents that required care and patience. Each challenge became an opportunity to support one another, to demonstrate reliability, and to deepen the bond that had grown steadily over time. They learned the rhythms of each other's hearts, the comfort of shared silence, and the beauty of ordinary days made extraordinary by companionship. Micah began to realize that he had been waiting, unconsciously, for someone like Alina to arrive. For years, he had focused on solitude and survival, but what he had not realized was that his heart still longed for connection. Alina's presence had brought not only joy and warmth, but also a sense of purpose beyond his daily routines. He discovered that caring for another person and being cared for in return could heal wounds that solitude alone could not reach. Alina, too, found a sense of belonging and fulfillment she had never expected. The desert, which had once seemed vast and empty, now felt alive with possibilities. The cabin was no longer just a shelter. It was a home built with laughter, shared work, and trust. She had come by accident, yet she felt that she had found her place in the world, alongside Micah, contributing to a life that was grounded, meaningful, and full of quiet joy. One evening, as the stars appeared in the sky and the desert cooled, Micah and Alina sat on the porch, wrapped in a shared blanket. They watched the night spread across the land, the silence punctuated only by the occasional call of an owl or the whisper of the wind. Micah turned to Alina and said softly, "I never thought I could feel this way again. You've changed everything." Alina smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "And you've shown me that even mistakes can lead to the most beautiful things," she replied. The months passed, and their life together became a steady rhythm of work, learning, laughter, and quiet reflection. They celebrated small successes, comforted each other in moments of frustration, and shared stories late into the night. The bond that had begun with a mistake had grown into something real, lasting, and deeply meaningful. Micah had once believed that 15 years of solitude had made him immune to companionship. But he learned that the heart could heal, that trust could grow, and that even the quietest lives could be touched by connection and love. Alina had entered his life unexpectedly, but she had become an irreplaceable part of it. Together, they built a world where each day was richer, fuller, and more joyful than the one before. As the desert continued its endless cycles of sun, wind, and stars, Micah and Alina walked together, worked together, and shared the quiet beauty of life in the wilderness. Their story, which had begun with an unusual mistake, had transformed into a testament to the power of trust, patience, and companionship. They had discovered that life, even after years of solitude, could offer warmth, understanding, and the gentle certainty of a shared heart. In the end, the cabin in the desert was no longer just a home for one man. It had become a sanctuary for two, a place of growth, healing, and quiet joy. The desert, with its endless skies and rugged beauty, had witnessed the unlikely beginning of a friendship that had grown into love, a love built on trust, respect, and shared life. Micah Red Elk had found a companion, and Alina had found a home. And together, they faced the future with hope, courage, and the knowledge that even the smallest, most unexpected events could change life in the most beautiful ways.